to Brains and Birdies. I'm Allie Knight, LPGA and PGA certified instructor, and I'm here with Dr. Mark Harmon, performance specialist and psychiatrist. And today we're going to talk about the neurobiology of the golf swing. So I've always wanted to kind of know, how does your brain work in the golf swing? So tell us more.
Well, sure. So yeah, you hear a lot about kind of mechanics, right? But interesting enough, people very rarely talk about what your brain is actually doing, because mechanics are impossible to do if your brain doesn't start them, modulate them, correct them, and actually perform the swing, right? So understanding the neurobiology, or what's actually happening in your brain during a swing, can actually be an invaluable use for not only for players, instructors, kind of across the board, because it also helps us identify sometimes where in the swing something's going wrong, right?
Okay.
So, to kind of we'll kind of go from a 30,000 foot view down to a little bit more of the specifics, because I think that's a little bit easier and better path to do. But so when you think of a golf swing, right, it actually is broken up into two components, right? So from the outside, when you're observing this, or when you're teaching lessons, or you're playing, or whatever, you basically really only have two phases. Now, different models will break that down into an infinite number of different stages, but as far as your brain's concerned, you have two,
Okay.
right? We could stretch it and say three, but for simplicity and application, we'll just say two, right?
Right.
So we have a conscious part of our swing, and we have an unconscious part of our swing, right?
Okay.
So here's one of the, or here are the two most important concepts in that, right? And this is for players, instructors, everybody, right? Your conscious brain, or the conscious part of your swing, is very slow and very deliberate. Okay. So there are phases where that's perfectly fine. That doesn't interfere with anything, right? But a golf swing in and of itself can oftentimes happen as quickly as within zero point 0.3 seconds,
Yep.
right? That's not slow, right?
No.
That's not slow. So we know that mainly when that part of your swing is occurring, particularly on the downswing, once downswing is initiated, right, your brain, and we're talking an ideal swing here, right? So because we can talk about real life, and that doesn't always happen quite that way, even though, but our target goal is an ideal swing. So in an ideal swing, once you begin initiation of a downswing, so from the top of your swing, from that point forward, your brain activity will be switching over to an unconscious, more automated process, which happens very fast, right? Very, very fast. So, when we look at that, one of the problems that occurs a lot, and when I help instructors become better instructors, or I help players become better players, it really doesn't matter which one I'm working with, and you and I've talked about this a little bit, is what's one of the first things an instructor, or maybe even a well-meaning friend, what's the first kind of instruction someone gives you to do in your swing?
Just, straight up, of just something, if it's a technique or whatnot.
So instructors can are usually much better at this. They'll at least sometimes give a drill,
Right.
or something like that.
Yeah.
But 9 times out of 10, someone tells you to think something.
Just a mechanical.
Yeah. So some type of conscious swing thought, right?
Yep.
Swing thoughts are wonderful in the slow and deliberate stage. they are absolutely deadly to a golf swing in the unconscious stage. Right?
Right.
So what happens is to answer so we'll to go back just a little bit to answer your question from that 30,000-foot view. Let's go a little bit lower and get a little bit more granular. So what happens if we start a swing at initiation or stance, right? So we're addressing the ball.
Mm-hmm.
You have already done your cognitive part. You've calculated the wind, you know where you want to hit it, you have your spot, you've done everything. This is just pure swing initiation of mechanics. So you've stood up, you're addressing the ball. You can have a swing thought to initiate,
Mm-hmm.
but once you do that, it should end there, right? And so here's why. The part of your brain called the prefrontal cortex, which is located here in the front, okay? This is your thinking, planning, strategizing, slow, deliberate,
Okay.
rational brain,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's what gets the party started, so to speak. It initiates movement to say, here's what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes when I'll tell this, I'll use kind of a story or narrative analogy and kind of like a business. So your PFC, you kind of think of it as the CEO of a company. They're not in the trenches doing the nitty gritty. They're bringing the broad picture strategy to say, hey, we're going to be the first to make these widgets. So that CEO will then give that project off to another executive, maybe a vice president, maybe a manager, whatever. Right. So that's known as the part of your brain that's known as the somatosensory cortex, right? So if the prefrontal cortex is kind of here in the front, right? The somatosensory are two little sections just directly behind it. So what those two components do is the PFC says, hey, swing. Right? It sends the message to this part of the brain that says, start muscle motor movement. I want to move my arms, rotate my hips, rotate my torso, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In this part of the brain, when it initiates movement, it can only initiate large muscle movement, right? So the example I will often give is I will tell someone, if you want to wiggle your finger, thank goodness the process didn't stop with the somatosensory cortex, right? And we actually know this from pathologies. So neuropathologies that we see patients that might have damage in certain areas of the brain, right? You can't wiggle your finger. You can only wave your arm,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it's large muscle groups.
Right.
Right? So how do we get around this? Because that's not what a swing is, right? Swing
Right.
is full of fine motor movement.
Mm-hmm.
So what that part of the brain then does is it sends a message to another area that's called the basal ganglia. Okay? And to be honest with you, this isn't just the golf swing. This is every motor muscle movement you do, period. From the
Okay.
time you learn to walk to wiggling your finger to a golf swing to a free throw to whatever, it doesn't matter. This is how muscle movement works in the body.
Okay.
So the basal ganglia basically is a project manager. It puts the project together and it says, okay, we need to do this list of 20 things to make a golf swing. The PFC have said, let's swing. Okay. So the basal ganglia then sends a message to another part of the brain called the cerebellum. Right? The cerebellum is the best thing you do if you find that little knot that we call a knowledge bump or the wisdom bump, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If you
Mm-hmm.
find that little knot, you're roughly where the cerebellum is.
Okay.
Okay, because it kind of sits tucked kind of up under the back, like a little fist, just kind of sitting underneath a lot of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
The cerebellum is really unique in the sense that it is responsible for all of our coordination, balance, things like that, particularly movement, and even quite a bit of visual. So the cerebellum then reaches out to another part of the brain called the parietal lobe, which just sits just kind of above it. The parietal lobe, this is really when we think of the unconscious mind or the subconscious mind. This is a lot of what we're talking about, a lot of parietal lobe activity. Right? So the parietal lobe is responsible for gathering all the sensory information that surrounds us, whether it's sight, sound, touch, feel, taste, whatever it is. It gathers all that information and it then says, okay, hey, you've told me you want to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We can do 1 through 3. We can't do 4 and 5. That's just not in the cards. Sorry. Now, all this is happening in nanoseconds, fractions of a second in your brain, right?
Yeah.
And it sends that information back to the cerebellum. And the cerebellum takes the information from all these different parts, from your feel, tactile touch, from sound, from sight, from taste, from smell, all of the sensations. And it takes, from the parietal lobe, it takes all this information that it's given it, and it says, okay, out of this list of 20 things, we can do these things, right? So it may be only 15 things. So it will then get this plan together. It will send it back to the basal ganglia, and it will say, and this is where it starts to get very specific, right? So it will actually tell the basal ganglia, we're going to contract our what's called latissimus dorsi muscle at 33.5% within this sequence of timing. And it will do that for every single muscle in your body that's involved in a golf swing. So it gets that specific down to it. Okay. It sends this plan and says, so we're going to do 1 through 15, not 20. And here are the specific directions to do this. And it sends it to the basal ganglia. Okay. At this point, swing is over. Impact is getting ready to occur. Right. This is the 0.3 seconds. Right. And so the basal ganglia at that point, it gets the final list from the cerebellum and it shoots it out down the nerves to the muscles, and everything contracts in coordination, in sequence, exactly how that plan's laid out.
Wow, yeah.
Okay, so that seems very complicated, and oftentimes, the first thing I will normally be asked by instructors like you or even players is, why do I care? Right? Legitimate question. Legitimate question. I care because it's my field and it's what fascinates me in life. I can appreciate if someone's like, I just want to hit a golf ball. They absolutely can ask, why do I care? Right? So the why there is this. Because of this neurobiology, because we understand this, here's what it then teaches us and how we begin to apply it. If you try to give a student swing thoughts during a downswing that they're supposed to be thinking, you have set them up to some extent to struggle, right? Because every time the prefrontal cortex has a thought, it resets that entire process. Remember, it's slow and deliberate. So it says, hey, we're going to swing. We go up. It's supposed to be going to an automatic behavior at this point. Instead, the PFC comes up with something new that you have to do. It halts the entire process and it has to start over. And for every time you start over, you're exponentially increasing the possibility of error.
Right.
The second thing that we know, so that's kind of the first thing is when we're giving students or players swing thoughts, are we giving them swing thoughts, and are they applying those swing thoughts in the proper timing? Right? So the second thing that we know is this, that the whole latter part of that process, once it goes kind of to the basal ganglia specifically, but even somatosensory, it's already started. That's what I mean. That's what I meant earlier by we could break it into 3 phases. One of those phases being a transition phase, but the transition phase is so transient and so brief that it's really not worth looking at because you can't even really deal with it. You can only start the process over. Is that latter part is 100% sensory. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's sight, it's taste, it's smell, it's feel, it's sound. It's 100% sensory. So instead of teaching a student, think about this when you're on your downswing, or think about that when you're on your downswing, or try to
Mm-hmm.
do this, or try to do that. If we instead teach them, pay attention to the sensations, what
Mm-hmm.
sensations, or we give them a sensation to try to identify, we exponentially increase the probability of success for them to learn that skill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, do you see that in your?
Yeah, and I think it's, the backswing, that's when we can have a swing thought, is basically pretty much what you're saying. When on the backswing, if it's straight back or whatever it is, that's it, and I can relate it to
Yeah,
myself because
absolutely.
that's where, for years, I had the same swing thought of straight back and then feel it into my left heel, feel my weight go into my left heel, and it's like I've been doing that and I
Yep.
didn't even
It's a
realize
sensation.
it's a
Yeah.
sensation. So it's having the swing thought on the way back is something that can definitely be okay. And then just a feel, a visual, something like that, some kind of sensing cue on the downswing. And that's,
Absolutely.
yeah. Now, if you're slowing it down, so say you have to give someone a thought that
Yeah.
for the downswing, they're
Sure.
just casting it so hard and you've tried it all
And you got to figure out a way
and
to
you got to
to help
figure it
them.
out.
Totally get it.
Sometimes, I would think by going really slow to being able to kind of connect that feel and that thought so that it can
Correct.
transition into that sensing
Correct.
feel.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're actually, when you're giving that example, you're actually talking about, or you're transitioning into a slightly different topic, or a slightly different action or behavior that we're doing. So
Mhm.
when you're, and you're exactly right, we can slow it down and be very deliberate on a downswing for the purpose of learning,
Right.
but the purpose of acting, you cannot slow it down.
Right.
And
Right.
and
Exactly.
what I see instructors particularly do more often than not is they don't clearly define that for the student or the
Mhm.
player.
Mhm.
And so the player goes off and they start to try to do this deliberate action on the golf course,
Right.
and their scores
Yeah.
just plummet and they're
Right.
frustrated, and they
No.
come back, or if they come back,
Right.
right? If they come back,
Right. Yeah.
which is not what we want as instructors,
Right.
right?
No.
They come back frustrated, and sometimes they'll even try to trust the process, but the process has still been halted because their
Mhm.
confidence in that process is just plummeting by the swing. Honestly,
Mhm.
it's not even by the second; it's by the swing.
Right.
um,
Yeah.
and so, what we have to do is just make sure that a student understands, or we start to model and teach them during our teaching and our lessons, is we're going to do deliberate 2 or 3 times, and I want you to start to pay attention, be
Mhm.
for lack of a word, if you
Mhm.
want to say, I want to be mindful of the sensations or whatever, and then you kind of require them to then speed it up. You're not allowed to slow down and be deliberate,
Yeah.
right? And pardon me. So you bounce this back and forth until they begin to then kind of solidify that learning,
Mhm.
but it needs to be made very clear that the learning process is not your swing process. And that's where I often see instructors kind of, and I want to be very clear in this statement. Do I think it's intentional, purposeful, or lack of skill and ability? No, it's just lack of understanding how the brain works. Why? Because I went to school a lot of years to understand how the brain works, right?
Right.
Too many, some would say. Um, but by having this kind of understanding, we can start to adapt our instruction to
Mhm.
actually suit and improve and be more effective
Mhm.
with our teaching. And so you just have to make sure you're being very clear on that.
Mm-hmm.
And even helping students understand, like, this is what your brain is doing during this process.
Right.
Students can often find that very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's basically you can use your conscious mind when you're practicing, when we're training, if you need that deliberate, trying to learn that new mechanic. But when you get on the course, we kind of have to switch over, and we got to make sure it's the unconscious, subconscious part of our brain.
Well, and I won't give away a future kind of episode that we're going to do, but at the same time, what I'll give a small spoiler alert, for lack of a better word, is yes and no,
Okay.
because you should practice how you play. So if you practice only deliberate, you're going to not play very well when you're not playing when you're trying to play deliberate, right? So
True. Yeah.
yes and no. You're exactly right. When we're
Right.
trying to learn that new skill, so for example, if someone is taking it way inside on their backswing too much, and you need to get them to understand the sensations of a proper swing plane, you slow them down during practice, or even if you're a player and you notice you're doing that, you slow down during practice a few times to get the new sensation of the swing plane.
Mm-hmm.
But you always follow that up. You would always end or spend a certain amount of time in your practice not being deliberate.
Right. You kind
Um,
of have to have that
to
balance
try
of
give it a chance
working
to
on it, but then
solidify.
hit. I like to
Exactly.
think of it as we might do two rehearsals where we're trying to go
Perfect.
slow, and then let's hit two or three, just hit it
Yeah, and
and
that's
kind of
perfect.
go back and forth.
Yeah, and that's perfect because again, the whole idea is your mind is going to perform the same way it prepares.
Hmm.
And that is something that I see occur in players, instructors, elite players, not quite so much, but it does still occur, especially if I
Hmm.
find if one comes to me that's particularly struggling,
Hmm.
they are not practicing the way they're playing oftentimes. And the amateur, the weekend golfer, so to speak, kind of has this concept that you're supposed to go on the range and just hit ball after ball after ball after ball after ball after ball after ball, or slow way down. But they're not practicing the way they want to play.
True.
And I think that's the one of the very huge benefits of having an instructor
Hmm.
is instructors know here's how we're going to do this. They can actually plan the practice, so to speak, whether it's an instructor or a coach, team coach, whatever it is, so that they can kind of encourage those players to yes, be deliberate to learn, but then make sure you're practicing how you're actually going to play it.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. Yeah. Great stuff. Really interesting. I think this is stuff that can help not only a teacher and instructor, but the player too, because
Absolutely.
there's so many that don't really realize how to be practicing
Yeah.
what the teacher is teaching them. Why does the teacher give them a drill, and then how to actually do it?
Well, and we've talked about at some point, for those of you watching, put your put your requests in the comments, because we're always open to different ideas and different things to talk about. But I know you and I have even talked about doing a couple of episodes on how do you practice? How do
Hmm.
you practice?
Exactly.
We taught you. Do you variable practice? Do you not?
Yeah.
How am I simulating,
Hmm.
whether it's competition or play? If you're a weekend golfer, maybe you aren't really interested in playing tournaments, right?
Hmm.
But that doesn't mean you don't want to improve or you don't want to play well. And so, how are you? Maybe you're not trying to simulate what it feels like to have the winning putt in the Masters, but you still want to have a good putt,
Hmm.
right? Or a recovery putt, or gosh knows, to scramble like like I pretty much do on every hole. Uh, but but you know, at the same time, you know, we've talked about, you know, maybe potentially having some episodes around things like that, which knowing this neurobiology very much will help.
Definitely.
You know, again, not like you
Definitely.
said, not only an instructor but even a player. How do I plan? How do I model my practice, play, etc.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
yeah. I think for the most part, you know, to kind of sum everything up, two big key takeaways. What I tell like instructors like you when you and I talk, and I think I may have even said this to you, and my whether it's my elite players or whoever it is it's okay. You don't have to remember all the names of the component of the brain. That's not the point of the story, right? Just keep these two big concepts in your mind, right? You have two phases, a conscious and an unconscious phase. Conscious, you can think, you can deliberate, it's slow, it's strategizing, it's actionable. Unconscious, you have to let that deliberation go. So, for example, you know, and let the body take over its automatic behavior, which is occurring without your conscious thought.
Right.
What I often will tell my daughter, whether it's in competition or we're just out playing around together, is you, your body already knows what to do. You have to get out of its way. So just trust it. Trust your swing. Trust all of the hard work you put in. And if you can learn to start to trust it, then that hard work you're putting in practice starts to pay off in
Definitely.
on the
Definitely.
course. And I say I know you've experienced that as well.
Yeah.
And so
Many times that's kind of been the saying for the week. Just
yeah,
trust it.
just
Trust
trust it,
yourself, and
which can
yeah,
be the hardest thing to do.
it can. It can.
But just you remember those two kind of big concepts, and you're golden.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, great. Good stuff. So we are Brains and Birdies. Make sure to like and subscribe to our channel.
See you next time.